Mary Jane Kelly, also known as Marie Jeanette Kelly, was the final canonical victim of Jack the Ripper. She was the only one of the 5 women to have a home, that is, a rented room, and this is where she was found on the morning of the 9th of November 1888. Mary Jane is probably the most well known of the canonical victims, and many are familiar with the details of her death. In contrast though, very little is known about her beginnings. In fact, it's very likely that Mary Jane Kelly wasn't even her name, because to date, no official records relating to Mary Jane Kelly prior to her death have ever been found. Let's look at what we do know. It's believed that Mary Jane Kelly was approximately 25 years old when she died, meaning that she would have been born around 1863. As well as Marie Jeanette, she was also known as Fair Emma, Ginger, Dark Mary and Black Mary. I'm not sure whether these referred to her skin tone, her hair colour, her temperament, or her general appearance. Sources give different information on this. She is said to have been blue-eyed, tall, stout, buxom, charming and very attractive. And it was also said that she was very well spoken, with no hint of an accent. Joseph Barnett, with whom she had lived just prior to her death, was able to provide some information about Mary Jane's background, but this information had come from Mary Jane herself, and it's not known how accurate, embellished or totally untrue this information is. He said that she was born in Limerick and she had moved to Wales with her family as a young girl. Her father's name was John Kelly, and he was allegedly the governor of an ironworks, and apparently she came from a quite well-to-do family. She had 7 brothers, one of which, Henry, was a soldier, and at least 1 sister. She told an acquaintance that she'd been disowned by her parents, but she had a close relationship with her sister. Despite the tale of coming from a wealthy family, and later testimony from several different people that Mary Jane was intelligent, scholarly, and a good artist, Joseph Barnett would later testify that Mary Jane Kelly would ask him to read aloud the reports of the Whitechapel murders to her, suggesting that she wasn't able to read them for herself, and this would be very unusual for a girl coming from a well-to-do family. At the age of 16, Mary Jane married a coal miner with the surname Davis or Davies. However, 2 years into the marriage, he was killed whilst working in an explosion. Left alone with no way to support herself, Mary Jane moved to Cardiff to live with a cousin, and it's believed that there she began sex work. She left Cardiff for London in 1884. Ending up in Brompton, she lived the gay life, that is, the life of a high-class prostitute in the West End. And this was through a French woman in Knightsbridge, likely her procurer, that is, she arranged the meetings for her with men. And Mary Jane was apparently very popular, making sufficient money to buy nice dresses, to live a comfortable life, and even to ride around London in a carriage. Around 1885, she was invited to go to Paris with one of her gentleman clients, and I wasn't able to find out who this was, but it would be interesting to know. But she agreed. She packed up her expensive dresses, and these were to be sent to her to France via the French woman in Knightsbridge. However, she returned after only 2 weeks, and she would tell Barnett that this was because she didn't like it, although it was during this time in France that she adopted the name Marie Jeanette Kelly. So there's a lot of awareness now about human trafficking. It's in TV, you see them on the restroom doors in rest stops, and apparently this was also common in Victorian times. Many young women came forward with tales of how they had been tricked to go to various countries in Europe, placed into brothels and held there as prisoners. And it would have been difficult to escape, not least because of the language barrier, if the woman had even been able to escape the building. It's been proposed that this is also what happened to Mary Jane Kelly, and that her French procurer had been behind it. Mary Jane may have realised she had been had when her box of dresses didn't arrive, a sign that something was very wrong. Fortunately though, if it was the case that Mary Jane was trafficked, she was able to get away and return to London. Although in some ways maybe it wasn't fortunate. Upon her return, she lodged for a while with a lady named Mrs. Bukey near the North Quays. It appears that the 2 women got on very well, and Mrs. Bukey even accompanied Mary Jane to Knightsbridge to the French woman to retrieve her expensive dresses. However, if the procurer did have anything to do with trafficking Mary Jane, It's likely that she would have sold her dresses. Either way, it doesn't appear that she ever got them back. And remember, these dresses would have been worth a lot of money. They would have been very valuable to Mary Jane. Over the next few years, Mary Jane made her way through the poorer areas of the East End of London, and it's said that during this time she began drinking heavily. And there's been talk that the reason Mary Jane moved to the East End is to escape from whoever it was that may have been trafficking her. It's very strange that after a trip to France for 2 weeks, rather than go back to the life that she enjoyed, the gay life, she instead moved to the East End, where her quality of life would be markedly worse. She lived with a man named Morganstone in Stepney, and following him, a man named Joseph Fleming, who she was apparently very fond of, and she spoke of him often, even in the time very shortly before her death. By 1886, Mary Jane was regularly staying at Cooley's lodging house on Thrall Street in Spitalfields, and the following year, on the 8th of April 1887, she met 28-year-old Joseph Barnett, a porter at Billingsgate Fish Market. She and Joseph went for a drink, and they agreed to meet up again the next day. The following day, 9th of April, the two met up again, and the date must have been successful because they agreed to live together. They lodged at George Street and then at Paternoster Row. However, they were evicted from there for non-payment of rent and drunken disorderly conduct. From there, they lodged at Brick Lane before finally moving to a 12 by 13 foot room in Miller's Court. And this had previously been the back parlour for 26 Dorset Street, which it sat behind, and the two were divided by a wooden wall. The room was sparsely furnished with a bed, 3 tables, a chair, a washstand, and a metal bathtub that was kept beneath the bed. The door to the room was secured with a mortise lock, that is, it required a key, and it was also secured with a bolt. During her residence there, Mary Jane had lost the key. She and Joseph locked and unlocked the door by reaching through a broken window pane and securing the bolt. And this window had been broken by Mary Jane when she and Joseph had been in a particularly heated argument, and they plugged this hole to prevent a draft with an old coat. One of Mary Jane's friends would later go on to say that Mary Jane was very unhappy with her life and that she wanted to go back to Ireland where she had family. In July 1888, Joseph Barnett lost his job, allegedly for theft. I couldn't find out any more information than this. I suppose the obvious assumption is that it was fish. Maybe he would pocket some from time to time to feed he and Mary Jane. Maybe it was more. I can't imagine that it was anything too expensive to remain living where they were living. But having lost his wage, Mary Jane had no option than to return to the streets to provide an income. And Joseph did look for another job, but he could only find temporary work. Jobs were hard to come by at the time, and I'm sure that if he had been sacked for stealing, he wouldn't have been able to obtain a reference from his former employers, so people would have been reluctant to give him a job. Joseph Barnett wasn't happy about Mary Jane having to return to the streets, and he also wasn't happy about Mary Jane inviting other prostitutes to stay in the room with them. For her part, Mary Jane also can't have been happy about having to go back to walking the streets. I wouldn't have been. And you have to wonder if part of the reason why she allowed these women to stay in the room with them was because she was annoyed with Joseph and it was to keep him at arm's length. Well, they quarrelled about this and he left her on the 30th of October 1888 and he went to stay at a doss house on 24 to 25 New Street in Bishopsgate. Despite this split though, Barnett would visit Mary Jane almost daily. He would give her money when he could. Perhaps he was hoping for some sort of reconciliation. And his final visit to Mary Jane was on the day before she died, the 8th of November, between 7 and 8 p.m. And Mary Jane was with her friend Maria Harvey when he arrived, apologising because he didn't have any money to give her. Barnett and Maria left Mary Jane at the same time, with Barnett returning to his lodging house. Later that evening, Mary Jane was seen drinking at the 10 Bells public house and later at the Horn of Plenty. At around 11:45, Mary Jane was seen by another resident of Miller's Court, Mary Ann Cox. Cox would later say that she saw Mary Jane returning home in the company of a stout, ginger-haired man with a thick beard, a blotchy face, aged approximately 36, wearing a black bowler hat and carrying a can of beer. She then heard Mary Jane singing for a while. George Hutchinson, one of Mary Jane's acquaintances, said that he saw her about 2 a.m. on Flower and Dean Street. She asked him to borrow sixpence. However, he didn't have it to give her. She told him that she had to find some money and headed towards Thrall Street. And there, a man approached her, tapping her on the shoulder and whispering in her ear, making her laugh. And Hutchinson said he heard the man say,
"You'll be all right for what I have told you,"
and put his arm around Mary Jane and the two hugged. Hutchinson would say that the man had a Jewish appearance and was elegantly dressed, out of place for the area. This made him suspicious, so he tried to get a better look. However, as the two passed him, the man saw Hutchinson watching him, and he immediately pulled his hat over his eyes and put his head down, as though trying to hide his face. Hutchinson said he followed them towards Dorset Street. On the way, the man whispered something to Mary Jane, and Mary Jane responded, "Come, I will make you feel comfortable, dear." Arriving at the inner courtyard of Miller's Court, Hutchinson felt he couldn't spy on them any longer, and he waited outside for around 3/4 of an hour, but he said that neither of them came out, and so he left. And Hutchinson gave a very detailed description of this man, as aged around 34 or 35, 5'6" tall, with a pale complexion, dark hair, eyes and eyelashes, with a slight moustache, curled at the ends. And he said that he was very surly looking. He was wearing a long dark coat with collar and cuffs trimmed with astrakhan, with a dark jacket under this, along with a light waistcoat, dark trousers, a dark felt hat turned down in the middle, button boots and gaiters with white buttons. He also wore a very thick gold chain, a white linen collar and a black tie with a horseshoe pin, and he stressed that the man was respectable and Jewish looking. And there were no more sightings of Mary Jane after that. A neighbour said that they saw somebody leaving at 5:45 a.m. Two other neighbours, Elizabeth Prater, who lived above Mary Jane, and Sarah Lewis, who lived at number 2, both stated that they heard a soft cry of murder between 3:30 and 4 a.m. However, they did nothing in response, as this was quite commonly heard in the area. Mary Jane Kelly was found later that morning by Thomas Bowyer, an employee of her landlord, John McCarthy, who had sent him to collect 6 weeks' worth of overdue rent. In 2015, author Wyn Weston Davies put forward his theory that Mary Jane Kelly was his great-aunt, Elizabeth Davies, born in 1857 and the daughter of a Welsh quarryman. And I understand that it was he who applied for Mary Jane Kelly to be exhumed in order that DNA could be obtained and tested. Well, so far this has been rejected. She may have been his great-aunt, but I kind of have mixed feelings about it. To some degree, there may be an advantage in obtaining her DNA to see who her family was, or even whether she has any matches on sites such as 23andMe. Not necessarily for our curiosity, but for her family. That being said, I also kind of feel like she should just be left in peace for everything that she went through. Her family are all long since gone. Nobody who missed her is alive to miss her still. Any remaining family wouldn't have known her. And you also have to wonder, if he's right about the Elizabeth Davies connection, why didn't her family come forward at the time? And why did Mary Jane Kelly go by an alias? She obviously didn't want people to know who she really was. And maybe we should just let her have that one thing. Of course, the exact location of Mary Jane Kelly's body there's probably a record of the general vicinity, but there will be several people buried there, and it may be difficult to determine. Mary Jane Kelly was laid to rest on Monday the 19th of November 1888 in St Patrick's Roman Catholic Cemetery in Leytonstone, London. No family members could be located to attend the funeral. However, several thousand people did attend. They gathered outside Shoreditch Church for the funeral procession, consisting of an open hearse containing the coffin and followed by 2 mourning carriages. And it said that the crowd were deeply distressed by this, with many people sobbing as the procession went by. Mary Jane Kelly's grave marker reads, "In loving memory of Marie Jeanette Kelly, none but the lonely hearts can know my sadness. Love lives forever." In the next video, we'll be talking about another of the Ripper suspects, Charles Lechmere. Lechmere is a very popular suspect at the moment, and this follows a researcher finding out in the year 2000 that Charles Cross, who allegedly found the body of Polly Nichols, the first canonical victim, wasn't actually called Charles Cross. He had given the police a false name. His real name was Charles Lechmere. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.